Perfect. Thank you very much. Um, so yes, just shortly to tell you about Digital Switzerland and our activities. Digital Switzerland is the independent voice of digitalization in Switzerland, with the goal to transform Switzerland into a leading digital nation. So what we do is we bring together various stakeholders from society, science, economy, and government for dialogue and in order to reach this goal of transforming Switzerland into the leading digital nation. We have over 160 members and partners that collaborate with us on different Swiss-wide initiatives in different areas, such as education, cybersecurity, and AI, public policy and foresight, and health. This is, of course, not the whole picture, but just to give you an idea of some of the topics that we are working on. So, without any further ado, and having set the scene now, I would like to welcome our speakers and panelists of today. We will first listen to three short presentations from our speakers. Each of them will be around 5 minutes, and we will then open up to discussion to also you, the audience, for the Q&A. So feel free to ask your questions at any time in the chat. And Linda will make sure that your question will be asked and hopefully also answered in the Q&A. If you have a specific speaker that you want the answer from, please also indicate that. And now I'm very happy to welcome Michael Mandl. He's the co-director of Swiss Clean Tech. Then we have Res Vici, who is the delegate for sustainable digitalization at Swisscom, and Matthias Heimo, a project manager at Swiss Data Center Efficiency Association, in short, SDEA. So here I would like to hand over to you, Michael Mandl. I will be sharing the screen, so you can just tell me when I should click.
Thank you, Cecile. Welcome, everybody, also from my side. I will try to present you our newest white paper about AI and climate protection in 5 minutes. Not an easy task, but I will try to. You can already switch to the next slide, Cecile. As you can see, we published a white paper last year together with our member Accenture about AI and climate protection. The white paper consists of 4 main chapters. Just really briefly, the 4 main parts are firstly a climate AI solution matrix. The idea was to show an overview of all the existing AI tools in Switzerland, but also internationally, who have a specific target in climate protection, climate adaptation, or climate mitigation. So it's an overview of all usable AI tools in this area. So don't hesitate to look in our paper to check out these solutions. I won't go into detail about these solutions. Res Vici from Swisscom will later show you some practitioner insights in the actual usage of AI in climate. So he will show you examples of how to really using AI to optimize energy consumption, reduce emissions, or address operational challenges. My focus today will be on the topic of the increasing electricity consumption through AI, a topic that has been in the media through the last couple of weeks and months. The different a topic that is really hot, as you mentioned, Cecile. I will go into more detail now or just before that. Just the last part of our paper was a summary of different recommendations for actions, focusing on companies' AI strategies, and especially addressing all the people who are working in CSR, how they can implement AI in their existing AI strategy, or how they can use sustainability matters in the AI strategy, or vice versa, using AI in their sustainability strategy. But as mentioned in the next slide, our focus was mainly, or will be mainly today on this topic of the rising global electricity consumption of AI. But if we talk about electricity consumption of AI, we have to talk about data centers. In the end, this is what is measurable at the moment. This is what it gives us some perspective of how the energy consumption, electricity consumption will rise in the future. This graph from Bain & Company shows you already what the global, or what the electricity consumption of data center is today. It's about 1 to 2% of the global electricity consumption, but so still a rather small margin, but it's obviously increasing rapidly. Also in the last couple of years, between 2019 and 2023, the electricity consumption of data center grew by 72%. So immense growth in electricity consumption. By 2027, depending on the scenario, it will already double. And it is also you can also see the same curve in the power consumption of the bigger IT companies. Google, their data centers only in 2023 increased globally by 17%. So, and with all these global perspective, and especially also with the companies like Google and Microsoft, the main driver is the use of AI. All our research has shown that. Obviously, there are also other drivers, and that brings me to Switzerland. In Switzerland, the use of data centers in 2026 will be between 2.7 to 3.5 terawatt hours. So that is around 5 to 6% of Switzerland's current electricity consumption, already a bigger margin than globally. That is also because Switzerland is a very attractive country for data centers, but also have different usage of these data centers. I think Matthias will go more into detail later on. And what is also, let's say, a bit concerning is that this electricity consumption by data centers will also rise in Switzerland. All the talks we had with experts from data centers, universities, estimated that around 10%, the Swiss total consumption of electricity by 2030 will be around 10%. And the last point, which is important, in Switzerland, let's say the part of AI on this huge amount of electricity consumption is probably quite insignificant, at least right now. There are other energy incentive applications in Switzerland, probably mainly digital application, hosting of data, but AI in Switzerland is, compared to a global perspective, less relevant, just because we don't have these very energy incentive large language models which are trained in Switzerland. So on the next slide, I will try to show you a bit how we could balance this huge growth of electricity, power consumption of data centers and AI in general. There was a study from the Swiss Federal Office of Energy from 2021, which is shown in this graph. There is a huge potential in data center infrastructure of around 46% to reduce electricity consumption. So we have a huge potential to decrease this power consumption, but we have to take action. We have to do it like on two sides. One of it is on data centers, it's infrastructure related measures like raising system room temperatures, free cooling, but also on the IT related side. So using more efficient components such as GPUs, capacity utilization has to go up. But without going into details, there is a huge potential in energy efficiency in data centers itself. But also on the side of the actual tools, if you compare the first AI models of ChatGPT, Gemini, but also new models like DeepSeek, you can see that the efficiency potential is really high. Studies determine a potential to 50 or 60% less energy usage compared to the first models. So the actual models and the newer models will be way more efficient. And in the end, and that's also one part of our white paper, was to show that there is AI also as a help to reduce energy consumption, also reduce CO2 emissions with AI tools. As I mentioned, Swisscom will show you how AI tools can help to achieve their sustainability goals. And but not least, something that is rather new is the investment of private companies in renewable energies. Microsoft has proclaimed last year that they will invest around $10 billion by 2030 just to get their AI solutions powered by renewable energy. Just the amount of it is quite big compared to, let's say, these 10.5 gigawatts are around the capacity of 10 times the power plant Nantes, so the biggest water hydroelectricity plant in Switzerland, or amount similar to a nuclear power plant of Leibstadt. So huge capacities which will be built in Switzerland. In Switzerland globally, sorry. And perhaps on my last slide, I want to give you 3 recommendations of action, which we think are important if we want to reduce the negative impact of AI in electricity consumption in Switzerland. Firstly, we have to make better use of waste heat. At the moment, waste heat in Switzerland from data centers is practically not used. We could, in medium term, use waste heat for heating households. Around almost 5% of all Swiss households could be using this waste heat of data centers, but at the moment we don't really use it. So we need probably some regulations as those in Zurich. Zurich has implemented a regulation which prescribes the use of waste heat for data centers. This will definitely contribute to greater sustainability in data centers and can be a role model for other cantons. But also energy efficiency regulations. I won't go into details because Matthias will talk about it later, but there are also plans to uniform building standards of data centers to make them more efficient. The Swiss Society of Engineers and Architects are working on a norm which will help to implement way more sustainable data centers and build them in Switzerland. And lastly, I think that is an important criteria also for the users of data centers. All the companies who use data center for the storage of their data, they also have a responsibility. We have to hold them accountable. Just a number, 85% of all the power consumption of data center is by their users, so not by the providers, so from the companies who use their data centers. So they have a responsibility. It would make sense to probably develop together with the companies certain criteria like capacity utilization or the choice of hardware if you want to improve the power consumption in these data centers significantly. We are sure it's not going to be easy, but it's something that we are thinking about and probably work together with other associations to implement these criteria in the future. So this is just a brief overview of this topic. I hope I stayed almost in time, Cecile, and I will give on to Faith now.
Thank you, Michael, for also this overview. Also offering some very interesting numbers. I think we'll pick up on some of these elements in our panel later on. But without any further ado, I hand over to you, Matthias.
Thank you, Cecile, and thank you, Michael. So let's talk a little bit at the energy consumption in data centers in detail. And let's start on the next slide with the basic but important questions. What do we mean when we say data center? Because in absolute numbers, most data centers are still on-premise. So what you see on the left, a data center that is internal within the building of an organization that wants to keep their data in-house. But when we talk about data centers, what we usually mean are the 2 other cases, the co-location data center in the middle. Co-location data centers operated by companies like Green, Digital Realty, Equinix, Infomaniac. Those are buildings operated by data center specialists who provide power, cooling, and space to IT clients, such as pharma companies, banks, governments, you name it, who then host their IT in this data center. And finally, on the right, the hyperscale data centers, those are the huge server farms operated by the Googles, the Metas, Microsofts, Amazons, Apples of this world. Those are massive facilities to power the global cloud platforms or power, as Michael said, large language models. And while those players are active in Switzerland, we don't have any hyperscale data centers in Switzerland. Maybe just to give you one example, why not? Microsoft operates a data center campus in Boynton, Virginia, United States. That's about the size of the whole city of Zug. So we're talking different dimensions here than what we can have in Switzerland. So let's talk about colocators and hyperscalers on the next slide. And the challenge we already know. And I want to apologize to Michael because I stole this slide from his presentation because it's actually perfect. It shows exactly where the challenge lies. So I just added those green lines and squares to this slide. And if it's a little too small to see, in 2020, the global data center energy consumption was 241 terawatt hours. Now, in the most likely scenario here of this study by Bain and Company, by 2034, so that's in 9 years, we're looking at 2,410 terawatt hours. So a projected tenfold increase in global data center electricity demand. Now, a lot of this increase is driven by those hyperscale data centers that we don't have in Switzerland. But as Michael said in their study, all indications in Switzerland point towards the same direction, even if Switzerland is not at the global forefront of this rise in energy consumption of data centers here will rise as well. So let's now look on the next slide, please, at how a data center actually uses all that energy. Simply put, energy is used for two things. On the left, we have the data center infrastructure, the cooling, the lighting, security systems, elevator, all the energy that the building itself is consuming. And on the right, we have the actual IT infrastructure, so servers, storage, and network. Now, here's the interesting part. When we talk about data center efficiency, people almost always mean the left side. So how efficient is your data center? How efficient is your building? But and Michael already gave it away. On the next slide, you see that in a modern colocation data center, more than 80% of the energy is actually consumed by the IT. So your data center can be one of the most efficient infrastructures in the world if your clients' servers are idle or underutilized. It doesn't matter much because a lot of all those terawatts of energy is simply going to waste. And those clients, be it banks, governments, pharma company, whoever stores their data in the data center is responsible for its efficient utilization. So, and this is my last slide, Cecile. If we want to take on this challenge of rising global electricity consumption by data centers, we need to make sure to take a comprehensive approach to data center efficiency and sustainability, starting with what Michael said, making sure that data centers are powered by renewable energy. And luckily in Switzerland, data centers have this possibility. Many parts of the world don't. Making sure that data centers do optimize their own energy consumption, because the reality is that many data centers simply don't know how efficient they are because they never measured it properly. Making sure we do use the waste heat of data centers, for example, for heating purposes. But it's important here to emphasize the we, because we're talking to data centers who are willing to give their waste heat and actually give it for free, but they can't find anyone who actually wants it. So it's also up to local communities or energy planners to step up and build the infrastructure to put that heat to use. And then finally, as I just mentioned, the IT, because while it's the largest power guzzler or power consumer in a data center, it still too often gets ignored when we talk about data center efficiency. But we need to break up those silos and stop chasing isolated metrics and start looking at the full picture if you want to make sure data centers power a sustainable digital future. That's my input for now. Happy to discuss in the panel.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for giving us a bit more insights into what we mean by data centers and the different elements of energy consumption of data centers. Now I would like to hand over to you, Rees, to hear about more positive aspects of how we can actually use AI for more efficiency and mitigating energy consumption. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. My role today is to show you the potential for helping the climate or energy efficiency through AI, and I have brought 4 examples that I quickly describe you. They all come from startups, and yeah, startups that we from Swisscom try to support. But let's directly jump into these examples to show you that AI is not just an energy-consuming technology, but can also help to save energy and save CO2. First example is a Swiss ETH EMPA spin-off called Waibu. They have developed algorithms which create digital twins of every room in a building and can actually steer the thermostats. And they don't have their own thermostats. They work with the common thermostats like Danfoss to optimize the heating in a building. They have managed to save up to 40% of energy in buildings, which is only possible if you go actually on the room, down to the single room, and not just on the heating system in total. What makes that solution also special is you can see that graph on the investment needed per ton of CO2 saved, and you can see it's so much more efficient to use such a solution instead of first focusing on the whole construction of the building or a photovoltaic or a heat pump. Of course, you have to do that also in the future, but if you start with a solution, AI-based optimization of the thermostats, you can save a lot of money and CO2 with little investment. Yeah, let's jump to the next example. It's also a Swiss startup. It's called 42Hacks with their solutions ÖV42. What they do is they use data from different sources. One important source is actually anonymized data from our mobile networks. And with that, they analyze how many people actually live in a good position to use the public transport or which people really need to take the car. And with this data, they help companies, but also cities, regions, cantons to optimize the offering of public transport, of work smart. And they bring together actually companies, cities, and the public transport to optimize the whole mobility system of Switzerland. Yeah, the next example, please, is now more in the reporting space, in the data space. This is actually not a Swiss startup, or it's only partly Swiss. It's a European startup called Sweep. One of the 3 founders is a Swiss guy living in London now. They're one of the leading ESG software solutions in the world. They have actually managed to become, I think, number 2 in the latest ratings of all the ESG solutions. And they have an assistant in there called Sweepy. And this assistant helps you in different ways. It can help you to write responses for your CSRD reporting based on your recent reports. For example, it can help you to check data, suggest emission factors, or even find the right measures to reduce your CO2. And this solution has been now implemented in a few Swiss companies. You can see the logos on the bottom, and should make reducing CO2 and achieving net zero much more fun and much more also assisted by AI and made easy. Yeah, let's jump to the final example. This is more a bit outlook into the future. This solution is not being used yet in Switzerland. It's a platform that was developed in the UK. It's called Mondra. What they do is they create digital twins of all the products in the retail and food branch, and they have managed to bring 90% of the retailers in UK on their platform. And that means that all products that go through the retailers in UK have this digital twin, and then the suppliers of these products, even down to the farmer level, are invited to improve the digital twin of their product and reduce CO2, especially then also on the farm, where actually a lot of the CO2 is created for the food. We are currently in discussion with the Swiss retailers if we can help them to implement this platform in Switzerland to approach this huge challenge to reduce CO2 in the scope 3 of our Swiss retailers. Yeah, these are a few examples of how AI can be used to reduce energy, and I'm also available then for questions and the discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Rees. I will stop sharing now as we will start the discussion now. Thank you very much for the illustrative presentations and the different perspectives on the link between energy consumption, data centers especially, and the use of AI. I already see that there are a lot of questions in the chat, so we will make sure that the panel will not be too long, so we can also take a lot of Q&A questions. But I would like to start with a question to you, Michael. So you mentioned the main findings or some elements of the published report that came out last year. Maybe a more practical oriented question, the management of a company, what would be questions that they can ask themselves before they adopt AI or when choosing a data center operator?
Okay, I mean, yeah, not an easy question actually, but I mean, as we try to develop these recommendations in the last chapter of this paper, we try to focus more or less on that. So what are the right angles to go to if you want to make your AI strategy more sustainable, for example? Or, as I mentioned, from the other perspective, you have a sustainability strategy in your company, but you want to use AI. And there are a couple of different questions you can ask yourself depending where you enter. But what we can say, or what also Accenture with all their customers have shown us, is that if you want to really make an impact in terms of sustainability and AI, you have to attack it on the highest level. You have to go more or less on C-level and get your CEO or CFO involved if you want to implement AI strategy that are more sustainable. Because what we see a lot is that there are different areas in a company who develop, for example, an AI strategy in, as Rees mentioned before, optimizing their supply chain, for example, but they don't really talk with the sustainability people or just in terms of other aspects, but not AI. And so either you develop certain AI work streams where you make sure these different areas of a company really talk together, or as I mentioned before, you really go on the highest level and try to show what an impact in a good IA solution can make in terms of more energy consumption or less. And of course, as I mentioned before, and what has also Matthias told you, it's really important that you talk with your responsible areas who, let's say, are responsible for all their data centers, all data hubs, to make recommendations in terms of these criteria I mentioned before, using the right hardware, using the higher temperatures in cooling systems. But probably Matthias can elaborate a bit more in terms of what should be the right answers or questions.
Yeah, Matthias, do you want to add something here?
I can underline or sign everything that Michael said.
All right. Yeah, so Michael, you also mentioned in your presentations that one element that would be important is that standards would need to be put in place for efficiency and emissions of data centers and IT infrastructure. It would be interesting to hear from you, Matthias, what your thoughts are on this, and how far are we in this process?
It's a great question. I say I agree with the fact that we need universal standards to measure efficiency and emissions. I mean, we ourselves, the SDEA, we were founded a couple of years back with the idea to develop a label that certifies efficient data centers. And as you can tell by my presentation, not just the building part, but also the IT and the CO2 footprint. And we're traveling the world basically with our approach of this end-to-end efficiency, and people still look at us weird because data center conferences are building conferences. It's about security doors, it's about cooling systems. And when we say look into the IT, that's where the energy goes. And people look at us like, what does the IT have to do with the data center? And vice versa. If we talk to IT clients at conferences and we talk to them about data center efficiency, they tell us we don't have our own data center. We're in a co-location. So there's still, as I said, those silos. There are standards out there to measure basically everything in the data center, from where your power allocation goes, from water usage, your carbon footprint, but it's all isolated standards and metrics. There's no comprehensive standard out there yet where the industry could really, I guess, get behind and say, this is what we do now. We, as a small nonprofit, we try to talk with other certification body standards out there to try to find like the least common denominator that the industry could agree on certain metrics, on certain frameworks. But it's a long process. And I personally believe that unless there is regulatory pressure over probably all of Europe, which would then probably include Switzerland too, I don't think this is going to change, because it's such a complicated, like a data center, there's so many things you can measure or not measure that people don't know where to start. And if there's no regulator coming and saying, look, now this is what we need, this is what we consider efficient, do it, I don't think that the industry itself will align on certain standards or certifications.
Yeah, very interesting. So Rees, we heard different use cases that you showed us of how AI can help drive up efficiency. I would be interested to hear your thoughts on whether AI-driven efficiency offset can really offset the entire demand or the entire increasing energy consumption demand of advanced technologies. Do you think if we really find all the different use cases and implement that and also help companies that are not yet on the AI train to also adopt, that we can then offset the increasing energy consumption?
Yeah, that's
It's a bit a philosophical question. I'm aware of that.
not so easy to answer question. Yeah, I mean, so far, maybe I can say that so far we were always proud to say that the ICT industry has the bigger lever in climate, or the biggest possibilities, potential to reduce CO2 through intelligent solutions. Then there is the consumption of CO2 or the emission of CO2 through the products. So there are many studies showing that there's much more savings through ICT than actually the emissions. But now, at the moment, when we see this increase of energy consumption, especially from the large language models, yeah, I think there's still a study missing. I'm not sure if the study that was done by Swiss Cleantech and Accenture does estimate if in overall there will be more savings or more emissions. Maybe Michael, maybe you can say something about that. But I'm not sure about, if you see the discussions now about more nuclear power plants, yeah, if this is still the case, if it's still a positive balance.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. What we have seen, and there are studies which try to measure the impact of AI in terms of reducing CO2 emissions by using tools as Rees showed you. They estimate around 5 to 10% reduction of CO2 emissions worldwide by 2030. So quite a large percentage, I would say. But as usual with these studies, I mean, you don't know where AI will go in the next couple of years. There is such a high dynamic in the evolution. Just alone, what DeepSeek has brought us, like in terms of new perspective on how efficient an AI tool can be compared to the more common ChatGPTs, Geminis, just because they had to use different GPUs and different infrastructure to develop it and run it. So, I mean, there will be just because of this high demand at the moment and the high dynamic of companies developing new AI tools, new very specific applications. It's really hard to measure it. But we try to, in our study, we try to like measure the side of energy consumption. It's not a measurement we did by ourselves, but with all the discussions we had with experts, that's what I showed you before. To measure the positive impacts of AI in terms of reduction, we are quite sure their impact is positive. If we can really level out the negative impacts in terms of energy consumption, is really hard to tell. But it really determines on what kind of energy these data centers use. As Rees mentioned before, if they start, and that's what we see at the moment, Microsoft, Google's, etc., they all invest in renewable energy or new nuclear plants because they have the net zero targets. And they want to achieve their goals by 2035 or 2040. So if they want to achieve their goals, they have to invest remarkable high terms in renewables. Without that, they won't achieve achieve their goals. So we are quite sure that there are perhaps, or we hope there is a balance between the negative and positive impacts.
If I can add something to that, because Michael touched on an interesting point. We're talking growth, and all these projections, but it is well possible that the industry kind of gets slowed by all this growth. I just say like it's slowed down itself because there's a lot of limiting factors right now. First of all, do we have the resources for all those GPUs, for all those AI chips that we need? The power grids right now were not made for all this growth. So where do we get the power from? An economic factor. I just recently read that to meet all the demands of generative AI, Google would have to buy 400,000 additional servers, which is an investment of like 100 billion, would reduce its operational margin to zero. So that's not feasible. So DeepSeek is really a good example of maybe are we thinking the wrong way, not thinking at how can we power all this energy we need, but how can we do it more efficiently and smaller? So all these the graphs that we've seen, I'm kind of hoping that those are projections that will not come true because we find ways to significantly reduce the growth of all these energy consumption that we're talking about.
And something we, to a certain degree, already see nowadays. I mean, I don't really have the article right now with me, but I think Microsoft decided to stop building certain data centers because they had to adjust their projections. They thought they will need way more space in terms of data center. They need more power, and they reduced their predictions just because of this high dynamic I was telling about before. Yeah.
In the meantime, I had time to think a little bit more. The examples I showed are actually tackling the biggest sources of emissions. So if in buildings we would reduce between 30 and 40% CO2 emissions, in mobility we could reduce by the same amount, and then in agriculture, the whole food industry also, of course, enabled through AI, not directly in the building. Yes, it's directly, but the rest is more enabled. Then we're speaking really of large amounts of CO2, or large shares also of the CO2 of a country. To underline that, in UK, Mondra has about, I think, 1/4 of the total CO2 emissions of UK under management on their platform. So what's happening on that platform is really essential for the future CO2 balance of UK, and we hope to get the same going here, and then hopefully we can balance that positive and negative effect of AI over time. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting initiative, and I hope this can start going in Switzerland as well, the Mondra project. So good luck there. Here, I'd like to hand over to you, Linda, as the chat is waiting with its questions.
Indeed. Yeah, thanks for this engaged discussion. I think you already picked some questions from the chat, but something I would like to highlight. I think Matthias mentioned it briefly, to create more efficiency. And there is a question in the chat regarding small language models. Where do you see the potential there?
I think I saw this question. I mean, it's more of a statement. I think that in the question, I totally agree with Christian who put this in there. I mean, we're training now these huge large language models because they need to be trained with everything, every data that ever existed somehow digitally on this planet. But at some point, all those large language models are fully trained. There's no more data to train them. So I do think the future will be into smaller, be it local or organization-based large language models that will then not use this huge amount of energy anymore. It is also worth noting that when we talk about large language models, I also saw another question in the chat. How does a large language model use energy? It's basically two-phase. It's the training, which I just mentioned, where models are trained with terabytes of data to learn how to predict words or sentences in each context. And then it's inference. That's how we as users use, for example, ChatGPT. And with the massive adoption of those AI models, actually the use stage, so the inference has become more energy consuming than the training itself. That does not take away from the importance of creating those smaller AI models, but it's like today, it's how we use those models that drives the most energy consumption. A ChatGPT search, I think I saw recently, uses 10 times more energy than a Google search, just for comparison.
Mm-hmm. And it's perhaps to just try to take into consideration another question I saw, and I think it's more or less in the same direction. It's the question of coding. I mean, large language models, as Matthias told you before, it depends on how you train them, etc. But what we see and what is already happening is that AI is used in AI, like AI agents use specific tools in making coding way more efficient in terms of energy consumption. So, for example, it's also in our white paper an example from SAP. They use an AI tool just to make sure that all the coding they do is reducing or is getting more efficient in terms of energy usage. And these kind of adaptations of using AI will also help, obviously, to make coding way more efficient, to use more efficient large languages models, and et cetera, et cetera.
And to go beyond the software, which is indeed super important. I mean, what we do is basically measure the utilization of the IT. A vendor or a producer of servers tries to make the machine itself as efficient as possible. But we were in London 2 weeks ago at a conference on a panel where there was like an advocate for green configurations of a server, and then he said that there's a million ways how you can configure every single component in your server. If they don't match, then no matter how efficient you use your server, you're basically already wasting 80% of energy. So just to say, it's every aspect in there, be it software and be it servers utilization, that it's upon all of us and all in the industry to make sure that our future is more or less sustainable, even though it's not possible. I mean, we harm the planet, but let's make sure we harm it as little as possible.
There's also a huge difference between different program languages. I have a colleague who just shared a graph yesterday. There's a factor 100 difference between some of the program languages in energy efficiency. So the lever seems to be very big in how you do software.
And I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface of all that we need to do still to make this digitization, which is, I guess, necessary. I mean, I also have a smartphone and use data centers, but to make it really, to reduce the impact that digitization has on the planet.
Yeah, and here you're speaking of like what each and every one of us can do, but there is also a question in the chat regarding some potential regulations and incentives that could be done from a more governmental perspective. And I think some of you mentioned it also, like the Canton of Zurich. Do you see other good examples? Or I mean, we have at the EU level now this huge initiative to regarding the ESG, and now they did a step back because they see it's kind of overregulated. What do you like? What is your opinion there?
Who wants to take this?
You can start, Matthias.
I kind of gave it away already. I mean, we as the EA, we're based on the voluntary approach. We're not here for regulations or compliance. We want to approach those clients that want to lead in sustainability, be proactive about it, and not wait for regulations to be forced upon them. But even though I tell prospects, why wait until regulation will come? I personally do think, and I said this before, that regulation will come, and at some point maybe even will be needed to make sure that at least in certain areas we make sure that we have some common standards and try to adhere to them.
Yeah, completely agree with what Matthias said. I tried to cover it broadly, but let's focus, for example, as you mentioned, Zurich. I mean, the regulation they implemented is quite soft. They just said that it's prescriptive that you have to use waste heat if you build a data center, but how to use it, how you have to, or at what percentage you have to use this waste heat of data center, it's not provided in any law. It's also not on cantonal level. And what we see is just also on the side of buildings. I mentioned the SER, so this is the organization which covers all the engineers and architects, and they are responsible for all the norms which are implemented in Switzerland when you build a house or a bigger area of a football stadium, whatever. You have thousands of norms, but you don't have any for data centers. And I think that is also a lack of regulation at the moment. That's also why they started the process this year to cover and also give certain norms when you build a data center, that you have to keep in consideration sustainability factors, energy efficiency factors. I mean, it's very important, and we are highly agreeing with the SDA, what they do, and I think it's a very, very important initiative. But as Matthias said before, it probably won't touch every data center, especially not the small ones. I mean, small companies, some of the companies have their own data centers, which are highly inefficient. The bigger the data center is in Switzerland, the more efficient it is in general, because not all of them, but I mean, they get more efficient because these are companies who know what they do, but there are so many small data centers in Switzerland who are not efficient at all. And if there would be certain amount of regulation that will make sure that if you provide a smaller data center, you have to take into considerations the factors I mentioned, then there would be a bigger impact for sure.
Then we would again be just on the building side. You know, the rest is
Yeah,
left out.
just
Well, we
exactly.
talk now from software and IT, everything. Maybe one of the problems, or certainly one of the problems, is also what do you regulate as a regulator? You know, do you, of course, start with the building, but then what about the IT that uses this energy? What about software? What about coding? What do you do? You know, I think many regulators are simply kind of afraid to burn their hands because what do you do? You know,
But that's why we talk about buildings, because buildings, people
everyone
know
knows what the
buildings.
building is. Yeah,
Regulations knows
Yeah.
buildings, you know, that there
Yeah.
exist all these norms. So that's why we said this is an easy target, let's say,
Mhm.
like that. It's not that we want to have a regulation or more regulation in general, but this is an area where we know what we do more or less in Switzerland. So, but as Matthias said, it's way harder to get regulations in software or coding. I mean, already on the EU level to get this AI Act into power, it will be really tough to, and this is also just on a level of ethics and other areas, and just a little about sustainability. So
just add, you know, what we as a company feel or experience really quickly. So yeah, we have this climate and innovation law in place in Switzerland now since January 1st. So every company should go to net zero by 2050 at the latest. Actually, from us, close to the government, it's expected to reach net zero by 2040 even. So it's quite a lot of pressure. But unfortunately, there's really a fee missing, or you know, there's nothing, no consequences at the moment if you don't reach that. So it's we are missing that. We think it's a pity that for such an important goal there is no levers or fees or whatever. Yeah. So currently there's more pressure actually through the supply chains, where we are asked. Swisscom, how is the CO2 footprint of your AI solution, and how do you reduce it over the next years? Because we're part of the scope 3 of other companies. So we feel more pressure from the supply chain than from the regulation currently.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for this engaged discussion. With this, I hand over to Cecile for final remarks.
Yes, I would actually like to share this slide to get some insights of what the learnings of you participants are of this session. Yeah, you can scan the QR code or also join menti.com. I hope it works. Let's see if it works. Okay, yes, it works. Infrastructure versus data handling 2080. I will leave you some time to answer this. In the meantime, thank you to you the speakers, Matthias, Michael, and Rees, for taking the time over your lunch break to share your insights and your thoughts on this very important topic. We covered a whole bunch of things, the role of data centers, how AI can help reduce energy consumption in different industries. We heard some use cases on that. Now, also in the Q&A, we discussed the aspect of regulation and whether it is the regulation that is moving fast enough or whether it's other players such as supply chain that are maybe faster. So yes, as Matthias mentioned, we are still scratching the surface in some aspects, but it's important to keep the discussion going and also see what needs to still be done there. I think we should maybe also do a further webinar to also talk more about what specifically organizations can do and what can data centers do next to investing more in renewable energies or using renewable energies for powering their data centers. So let's see, maybe we can organize that still this year or next year. I see that there are some more answers that came in regarding learnings on Mentimeter. So I see AI is far from being green and energy efficient. Somewhat lacking was moonshot ideas, such as to what extent space exploration can positively impact the environmental sustainability of data centers. It all starts with software. The DC is only the last element in the chain. To think about sustainability in every aspect of a data center, from coding to renewable energy. I will keep this as the last remark. The end-to-end aspect that we also discussed in this webinar, which we can keep in mind. And I thank you also to all of you participants for staying with us this whole hour, and hope to see you at the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
You.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.